A migrant worker was forced to ask a budget centre for adult nappies because he was sleeping in his car after losing his job and home due to Covid-19. He doesn't qualify for a benefit because of his immigration status. The case has surfaced as more pressure goes on the Minister of Social Development to sign off a special epidemic provision under Section 64 of the Social Security Act to give benefits to people who wouldn't otherwise qualify. But the Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, hasn't done that, saying the government's working on other forms of support. Daryl Evans of Mangere Budgeting Services says a young migrant worker came in just before closing last night asking for food and help.
My staff member picked up that he had documented he had no children, however, had asked for nappies. When she investigated further, we've now learned that not only did he lose his job through Covid-19, he also lost his rental property. He was unable to pay the rent and therefore is sleeping in the back of a vehicle. The reason he asked for nappies is he's very shy, quite humble, and he's a little bit nervous and was scared of looking for public toilets in the middle of the night, especially here in South Auckland, and so he's been using nappies where he's been able to obtain them.
The budgeting service managed to find the man emergency accommodation last night. Heidi Sanwan is a social worker with Mangere East Family Services. She's working with a migrant family that's basically all out of options for help after the dad, who's worked here for the past 6 years on a visa, was caught between jobs when the lockdown happened.
They texted me yesterday for help with filling their gas bottles so that they can cook their food. They're also behind 5 weeks' worth of rent, and the only thing that I think is keeping them in there is that it's illegal at the moment to evict a tenant at this time.
Heidi,
so this is, yep.
Sorry to interrupt. That is a lot. So you're telling me that as of yesterday, they were out of gas, so could not cook food?
No, they couldn't, and so they were looking for options as to how to pay for that. And so I suggested that they contact their consulate, which they did, and the consul was able to provide gas for them.
So they are literally living hand to mouth at the moment. Where does their food come from?
So it's mainly from food banks. So we make referrals to the South Auckland Christian Food Bank. I just got a text from the mum today saying that Whānau Ora was delivering food for them, and they reached out to the Auckland Emergency Food Management thing, but that was only a one-off.
So how many people are in this family? Mum, dad and?
3 kids, 7, 4 and 3, and 2 in-laws.
So what is this?
One set of in-laws.
What is this like for them as a family to be reliant day to day on charity, in essence?
Well, they are very, very desperate, and as they pretty much grab whatever is given to them. The other complicating thing, Lisa, is they're Hindu, so that has to be stated in all the referrals that we make to the food bank. So they so they don't eat beef or pork.
Right. So the father has a work visa, but obviously it is difficult to try and get work right at this time. Is that his situation?
He's kind of locked. So what happened was he had an interview 2 days prior to lockdown, but that is obviously on hold now, and has not been able to go out of the house or even kind of talk about looking for work because there's just nothing.
So that job's been put on hold in essence while we're at level 3.
Yes. The other thing was a company was waiting for a skills match report from Work and Income, and from what I understand, that was to see whether there was any New Zealander who could do the job before it was offered to a non-New Zealander. Okay.
So what has Work and Income told you? I understand that you tried to get this family a benefit. What happened?
So we asked them for support, but the response was always that the family were not eligible for anything due to their residency status, We requested that they reassess the situation under Section 64 of the Social Security Act, which states that an emergency benefit can be granted to people who would otherwise not be entitled to be granted an emergency benefit during an epidemic in New Zealand, but their response remains the same, that people who do not have permanent residency do not qualify for any assistance from them.
So this clause in the legislation, as you say, during an epidemic, it allows, well, a special dispensation for people who wouldn't normally qualify for a benefit, but it requires the minister to sign off on that. Did MSD tell you whether they had put this case before the minister?
No, so all they said was they were going to email it to the National Centre, and we haven't heard from them since.
So what do you think of the situation that this family is left in?
I think it's absolutely bizarre. It's so sad that people who have worked and invested their lives in New Zealand don't get the support that they need.
Some people listening to this might think, well, why don't they go home to Fiji?
Well, the father obviously has skills that we need. Otherwise, the visa wouldn't have been extended for as long as it has been. Two of their kids have also been born here, so they consider New Zealand home. It's not an easy thing just to pack up and leave a place that you've invested in and lived in for 6 years.
So generally, what area of work is he in?
So he is a machine operator, an excavation operator, and a directional driller, so construction.
Right, and skills that we need here. We are going to be talking to the Minister Carmel Sepuloni later in the show. So I'd like you to speak to her now. Speak to her directly. What do you want to say to her?
This is a similar situation to the plight New Zealanders found themselves in Australia, which led to our Prime Minister asking the Australian government to allow New Zealanders to be able to access the benefit. This is a family who has worked in New Zealand for 6 years, and they are one of hundreds of thousands of families in immediate need now.
So you want her to show some compassion?
Absolutely. I mean, there's this whole thing about being kind throughout New Zealand at the moment, and this would definitely be a situation where we could be kind.
And that is social worker Heidi San Juan. And First Union has written to the Ministers of Finance and MSD asking for the epidemic clause to be fired up urgently. And we will speak to the Minister of Social Development after 6 this evening.